your please. You will now read.
All right, it is top of the hour, so welcome to the ADEPT Academy. My name is Tom. I'm one of the ADEPT, and I'm representing this month's ADEPT Academy. As you can see on the title slide, our topic this month is active listening. Last month, we talked about communication. We talked about spoken and written communication, and we felt that this category or this topic was so important we wanted to spend an entire session on active listening. So I'm excited to share some of the detail and the research that I've uncovered and help us all become a better and more active listener. Thanks for being a part of the Academy. As a reminder, the purpose of the Academy is to connect with our alumni. As you go through one of our programs, it's pretty regular to look at your workbooks, come to class and hear us teach, and then you graduate, and then sometimes it's a long time before we look at the workbook again, and we've offered this Academy as a way for us to stay connected to you and you to stay connected to your development as a leader. So whether you're logging in and you're live with us each month or you're watching this particular presentation as a recording through our library, the important thing is that you are committed to your development and becoming more of an adept leader. So thank you so much. This is for you, and we couldn't do it without you. One of the benefits of being a member of our ADEPT Academy is that you have an opportunity to participate in these monthly webinars, either live or by recording. Also, there is a private LinkedIn group. We still haven't launched it yet, but we're in the process of developing a private LinkedIn group where you can, where graduates can start talking to each other and maybe asking and posing questions to get the help of other folks who have been exposed to the same leadership development content that you have. Also, you'll receive calendar reminders. So listening to a presentation is great. The important thing is that you actually apply it. So we'll send a couple of reminders out to you after these sessions, just prodding and asking you how are you applying it. Also, as a professional member in the Academy, you have access to any of the ADEPT leadership facilitators if you want a quick 30-minute coaching conversation. So this could be around a specific problem that you're encountering in the workplace. It could be about a possible opportunity you're considering. It could be just trying to get out of a rut, but sometimes having someone objectively listen to you and then give you some feedback can help you, and we want to be that resource for you. So please reach out to us, let us know how we can connect with you, and we'd be more than happy to spend some focused time with you. Also, there's some online resources. In addition to the library of all of these presentations, we also have an online library of all of our templates. So as you go through our programs, you might remember the Achievement Planner or the Feedback Planner. All of those templates are available to you with your ADEPT Academy membership. We right now are doing live sessions the second Monday of every month, and if you're watching this right now as I'm speaking, you're live with us. Our next session will be July 9th, Tuesday, July 9th, and the topic is going to be influence strategies. Whether that is influencing some decisions that are taking place in the workplace, whether that's you influencing your team. We're going to talk about what are some of the ways that we can professionally influence decisions and people. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you as well. Also keep in mind all of these sessions are archived, and if you ever have any questions as to how to access that, just reach out to Tanya, and she's our technical whiz. She'll be able to get you where you need to be. So what are we going to do today? Well, as I always do, we'll review the 5 characteristics of adept leaders, and then relative to our topic, we will revisit communication. We spoke about that last month, but just a quick reminder of what communication is, and then more importantly, focus on this topic of listening. And then we're also going to talk about is listening different than hearing? And I think you'll find out, yes, there are 2 different words and 2 different meanings entirely. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time learning about how we can be better active listeners. What are the benefits of active listening? What are some ways that we can do it? We're also going to talk about listening styles, which I'm excited to mention or share with you as well. You might recall we used the DISC profile, and this closely correlates with that. So we each have a different listening style. So as a reminder, the 5 attributes of successful leaders, we call them ADEPT leaders. They're aware, they're directed by goals, they know how to execute, they know how to get things done themselves and through their team. Successful ADEPT leaders are people who care about people. They realize that the only thing that makes a leader are the followers, and those are people. The only way work gets done is through people. So if they don't view people simply as a cog in the wheel, they view people as individual, and they nurture and grow those relationships and try to understand the different needs and wirings of each individual person on their team. And then finally, successful ADEPT leaders know how to leverage and maximize talent, both their own talent as well as the talent of those around them on the team. So awareness, when we talk about awareness, there's really 3 levels of awareness. There's the self-awareness, understanding how I am wired, understanding what pushes my buttons or not, some of the natural tendencies that I have. They're not good, they're not bad, everyone has them, but being aware of what that is in me. And then once I have self-awareness, I can be aware of other people because they're typically different than me. And then also being aware of the environment or the context. This might be the work meeting that we're in, the project we're working on, the vendor that we're dealing with, but being aware that the environment or the context of our interaction also has a huge bearing on how things are going to go. Goal-directed, what do we mean by that? Well, successful leaders, they have a vision for their future, a vision for themselves and a vision for their team, and they have the ability to communicate that. Communicate it in a way where we might not be exactly sure what it looks like, but we have a good idea as to what it looks like for us and for our team. Successful leaders who are goal-directed have the ability to communicate that and connect with people to get them motivated to reach those goals. They also have a tendency to always remember what's important to the organization. So while we might be focused on our team, our challenges, our contributions to the organization, goal-directed leaders are constantly connecting what we are doing as a team to the larger goals and aspirations of the company so that our employees and people on our team understand the why behind what they are doing. What about getting things done? Well, we call it focused execution. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, I say the only thing, but the biggest thing that matters is what we are accomplishing at work. What are the projects that we're moving along and finishing? So ADEPT leaders know how to get things done, and they know how, and the most important thing about execution, as we've taught you, is focus, being able to focus on what matters most now and getting it done. Also, ADEPT leaders are people-centric, meaning they appreciate people. They understand that people are different, and they'll even spend time to understand what those differences are so that they themselves will know what they need to flex or change in order to connect with other people. They view their people as people who are coming to be a part of this project or a part of this team, and they want to succeed. They don't assume that they're just here to fill a seat and get a check. They believe that the people are motivated, self-motivated, because they want to succeed, and that every individual has their own different potentials. We each have different skill sets. We each have different strengths. And an ADEPT leader focuses in on that and draws that out of their people. And then finally, talent, they know what they're good at. They get better at that. For the things that maybe aren't a strength for that particular leader, they bring people around them to support them so that as a team, we are a high-functioning team, and other people's strengths will sometimes compensate for some of the things that I might consider weaknesses in myself. Also, when it comes to talent management, they are constantly asking for and giving feedback as it relates to performance, individual performance and team performance. And they're doing everything they can to make sure that their team has what they need to succeed. Well, That's a quick reminder of the 5 attributes of ADEPT leaders. It's who we are and hopefully what we have taught you and what we will continue to teach in all of our programs. So today's session is around this topic of active listening. And when we talk about active listening, it's a communication skill. So last session, we talked about communication. What is communication? And as you can see on the slide, it's the giving or the exchange of some information between 2 or more people, all with the goal of reaching some form of shared understanding. And the way that we kind of skinny down that definition is message sent equals message received. So as a leader, whether I am communicating via email or text or whether I'm conducting a meeting, as a leader, I'm constantly asking myself, okay, the message that I'm sending, is that the message that is being received? Because when that happens, that's when communication happens. But much more easily said than done. And last month I reviewed this you'll see this particular diagram in a lot of textbooks as it describes the complexity of communication, where someone, usually the sender, has information that he or she wants to get out and disseminate to someone else. And that might be through writing, it might be through texting, it might be through speaking. So this sender has the information and they must encode it. So that's physically typing out the email or thinking through the words that they are going to use in the meeting. And then the encoded message then gets transferred to the person that's receiving. But you can see in this model, on both sides of the message, there's noise. And by noise, yes, I mean sometimes physically the noise of a loud room. And if I'm speaking, that might be a hindrance to you hearing my message. But also noise includes interruptions, people not being focused, people not active listening, which is why we're talking about it today. But there's always a lot of noise. And then when a receiver receives the message, they have to decode it. So they need to read the email and then say, okay, what does this mean? Or they're listening and they're asking themselves, what does this mean to me? And that creates their understanding. Successful communication is that the information that was sent equals the understanding from the receiver. But as you know, most of the time and many times, that's not the case. They don't understand it exactly the way that the sender had intended it. So communication is complex. The goal, again, message sent equals message received. So this topic today, we're focused on active listening. Why is active listening a big deal? Well, some research that I found showed that about 70 to 80% of our waking hours we're engaged in some form of communication. So think about that. You get up in the morning and maybe you're talking to your children or talking to your spouse or talking to your dog. That's communication. Maybe they're communicating back to you. Hey, Mommy, I forgot my science project is due today. Or hey, husband, I'm going to be late today because I have a meeting. Or maybe that dog just looks at you and you know he or she needs to go out. But 70 or 80% of our time is spent communicating. We get to work and people are asking us, how was your day? You're going to the meeting. What did you think about that meeting? What about this project? We sit in meetings. We sit in conference calls. Even this time, you are listening to me. So a large part of our day, the majority of it, is spent communicating. And then these statistics is what I found highly interesting. Of all that time that we're spending communicating, 9% writing, 16% reading, 30% speaking, and 45% listening. So the majority of our time when it comes to communication, we're doing more listening than anything else. Now, I know that that is not the case with everyone, but nonetheless, the results were that 45% of our time is spent listening. So that is why understanding listening and becoming a better active listener is so important, because we spend a good bit of our time doing that. So is there a difference between hearing and listening? Well, there is. Hearing is, for example, in your office, if the door is open, you might hear some noise, other people talking in the hallway. Well, you're hearing them. It's kind of accidental. It's kind of happening. You really don't have to think about it. It's involuntary, and you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about that. Noise. You're at a restaurant and someone drops a plate, or you're at a restaurant and there's that buzz of other conversations. Well, you hear that. You hear people yelling down the street and those kinds of things. Well, that's hearing. And that happens all the time, and again, you're not necessarily asking yourself and saying, okay, I really need to hear that. You hear it regardless. Now, listening is much more purposeful. Listening is very, very focused. I am hoping as you are tuned into this session that you're focused and you're trying to listen to what I am saying. Listening is voluntary. No one makes you do it. You have to decide that I'm going to listen or not. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes my spouse and sometimes my kids will call me on it. Are you listening to me? And it's just the two of us in the room, and my answer should be yes, but really the answer was no. I wasn't listening because maybe I'm thinking about other things. So that's why listening is voluntary, and it's very, very intentional. You've got to work at it. You don't have to work at hearing things, but you do have to work at listening to other people. So the definition of listening is making a conscious effort to hear, okay? And active listening is applying the effort necessary to accurately perceive or accurately understand what that other person, the message that other person is trying to tell you or share with you. So 3 aspects of active listening is that there's a comprehension, meaning as the listener, I am actively engaged. I am actively analyzing what is this person trying to say? What are they trying to communicate to me? So I'm trying to comprehend. I'm trying to decode what they are telling me. The second area of active listening is retaining information. And yes, it's remembering things, remembering details, remembering dates, remembering names. And sometimes we just check in and say, okay, I'll remember that fact. I'll remember what's going on here. Or we'll take notes, which I highly recommend. One of the things that we teach you is, don't use your brain as a filing cabinet. And you could have the best of intentions of remembering that birth date or remembering that thing you need to pick up at the store or remembering what you need to mention to your manager when you see them. And sometimes we forget. So taking notes, writing things down helps us retain the information. And if you're in a class or even in a meeting, when you are writing things down, you are showing the other people in that room that you are actively listening to what's going on because you want to retain that information. The third aspect of active listening is responding. It's not just being a sponge and taking it all in, but along the way you need to provide some form, and sometimes it's verbal and sometimes it's nonverbal, and we're going to talk about each type. But you need to respond to the person to let them know that you're hearing and feeling what they are saying. So these are the 3 aspects of active listening: comprehending, retaining, and responding. And I'll point you to the source of this information, therapy, goodtherapy.org. So a lot of the information that I came across as I was doing this deep drill research on active listening, a lot of the information came up on websites that were dedicated to people in the counseling or therapy industry. And when you think about that, those are some of the best listeners you have ever encountered. It's a big part of their job. They comprehend what someone is trying to tell them in a counseling or therapy session. They'll retain it. And sometimes they do that by memory, or sometimes they'll do that in their notes. And then they respond. Many times in a therapy or counseling session, there'll be questions or there'll be affirmations and tell me more and those kinds of things. So this particular skill, for all of those folks that know people in the industry of therapy or counseling, we can probably learn from them as well, because it is one of their core competencies at being great at what they do. The active listening model that we share at ADEPT is EAR, E-A-R, engage, acquire, and respond. And engaging simply means having some form of empathy for this person. If this person is speaking to a large group, well, for some people, that is a pretty terrifying experience. So as an active listener, I might show some empathy for them that, wow, this is kind of hard speaking to 100 people. Or if it's just a one-on-one conversation and the person has got some emotion behind what they're sharing, having some empathy, whether they're frustrated or scared or happy. Another way to engage with active listening is eye contact. There is nothing more or nothing you can do that will show the person more that you are paying attention to them when you make eye contact. And in fact, I'll use this as the example. Right now you are looking at me on the screen and I'm having some eye contact with you because I am focused in on the camera. As soon as I look at something else on my desktop, or maybe it's the screen over here to my left and I talk, we don't have eye contact. And right now you are hopefully listening to me, but because you can't see my eyes and I'm not focused in on that, it's hard to do some active listening. So active listening, a big part of it is eye contact. Another one is exclusive focus, meaning you're it. I am focused on you. There's no music in the background. I'm not continuing to type out an email or a text message while you're talking to me. You're exclusive. I want to be engaged with you. So that's the E in our EAR acronym. The A stands for acquire. So as active listeners, we need to actively, and when we say actively, you've got to work at it, understand what they are trying to say. You need to acquire the true meaning, because many times when people choose certain words, those words may or may not represent the true meaning behind it. Another phrase that you've probably have heard is, listening or reading between the lines. That's a great example of trying to acquire the true meaning of what someone is saying. And then another key part of acquiring information, acquiring this understanding, is you avoid judgment. As soon as someone shares something, you don't immediately in your mind go, well, that's silly, or we tried that before, or man, that's a great idea. You try to reserve that judgment, because when you are forming those judgments in your head, you're focused on those judgments. And those judgments will taint everything else that you are hearing from that individual. If you think this is an awesome idea, well, you're probably not going to critically listen to what they are saying, because you've already told yourself this is an awesome idea. Conversely, if in your mind you said, well, that's not going to work here, we tried that before, no matter what they say after that, you're really not tuned into it because you've already passed judgment on it. So engage, acquire, and then finally the R is respond. So the third part of active listening is some form of responding, and that could be reflecting back to the individual, identifying with their feelings, their frustrations, their happiness. It could be restating what they have said. And sometimes if it's short enough, you could actually repeat what they have said. Restating what they said is showing them that you're listening and this is your understanding, and then they have an opportunity to correct that. Or simply reaction to it. So someone's telling you something and you react to it. It might be taking action on something. It might be a surprise, or it might be a, wow, that must really be hard. So that's the ADEPT EAR acronym. Couple of examples using those words, in engaging someone, okay? So again, we're trying to understand and connect with them. So, this situation must really upset you. So as you're listening to the words and you're watching the individual share something with you, it's very possible that they're upset, they're frustrated. So being able to say, hey, this situation must really upset you, tell me more, it's a way of engaging with them. Also acquiring, getting more information. So the example, do you mean the report was submitted without your knowledge, even though this is your responsibility? So that question is trying to clarify and grab a hold of what might the person be upset about. And then finally, responding is the feedback, or responding back to the individual. You believe that you're going to be judged unfairly regardless of what you do now. Okay, so this is just kind of drawing the conclusion to the communication and checking in with that person who is sharing with you to make sure that you're accurate. So what are some of the benefits of active listening? Well, One benefit is it obviously builds trust with people, and trust is the foundation of effective leadership. So if you are one of these people that's easy to talk to, that listens to people, that means people will trust you and they will seek you out. Also, active listening broadens your own perspective. When you are active listening, you're trying to learn, you're trying to understand, and many times what someone is sharing with you might be new or different information. So you get the benefit of learning from that and getting an additional perspective on something. Another benefit of active listening is it strengthens your patience, because let's be brutally honest, active listening takes patience. And if you don't naturally have a lot of patience, it's hard for you, and I am speaking from experience on that one. So active listening, making sure that I am trying to engage in this conversation and making the other person more important than myself, yes, it's going to help me strengthen my patience muscle. Another one, it makes you approachable. If your reputation or the way people view you is, oh, I can talk to her or I can talk to them or him, they listen to me, well then you're approachable and people will come and seek you out, seek out your opinions and your advice. Some other ones, some more benefits to active listening, as if those weren't enough. Well, it increases your competence and knowledge. So if you're in the meeting with 5 other people and they're checking out, they're not active listening, but you are, chances are you're going to have a much more complete, in-depth understanding as to what we were talking about in that meeting. Okay? So active listening makes you smarter. It helps you understand things more and you don't miss things or disregard things. Another benefit is it saves time and money. And when we say time and money, what I mean is when there's miscommunication, what typically happens? Well, at the minimum, at some point, there's going to be another conversation to correct your understanding. And that amount of time and it costs money. That's at the minimum. At the maximum, you maybe or your team maybe has taken some action that's inaccurate or a wrong action to take, and now you've got to unwind that, and that could take a lot of time and money. So hearing and, more importantly, listening and understanding the first time actually will save you time, money, and resources. And just about everyone I speak to says they wish they had more of time, money, and resources. So view active listening as an investment. Also, another benefit of active listening is that it will help you identify problems. Okay, if you're actively listening and taking it all in, you might hear some things, see some things, perceive some things that are going to be issues. And you might be the first one to realize those things. You might be able to get ahead. You might be able to be proactive in solving or eliminating or preventing a huge issue because you've connected some dots because you're actively listening. Now, one of the things with active listening is that there's some form of response. Now, when we talked about communication last month, we talked about verbal and nonverbal things that we should be doing to be a more effective communicator. Well, same thing applies here. There are verbal and nonverbal things that we can do, we can exercise, that will make us a more effective, active listener. So some nonverbal things that you can do to help your active listening. One is smile. When someone's speaking with you, and this could be one-on-one, or you could be in a conference where there's 50 or 60 people in the room. But smiling at the person that is speaking is a great sign that you are listening to them. You are connecting with them. Another one, and we mentioned this in communication, but eye contact, okay? Watching them, focusing in on them, not, it says here, but don't intimidate. I mean, don't stare them down, but having eye contact with them. I can share with you as a speaker when I get into a session, whether there's 15 people or 150 people, the people who are smiling, the people who are looking at me, they're the ones that I usually connect with because they're telling me I'm in this. Keep telling me more. So it's a great way to affirm to the person who is speaking that you are listening to them. Also, posture. So if we are in a meeting, or maybe this is a one-on-one, leaning in to hear what someone is saying, just physically, just a few inch movement to tell me more, shows them that you're interested in listening to what they have to say. Even sometimes a tilt of the head, or this way, lending an ear. I mean, subliminally, it just sends a message. I'm trying to hear you. I'm trying to focus in on you. So your posture can mean a lot. And the inverse is true too. Your posture can mean a lot. I mean, so if you're sitting there and you're kind of slumped over, your hands are folded, and you're just this blob on a chair, well, that's going to communicate, I'm really not into this. So your posture is one nonverbal way. Another nonverbal sign is mirroring the facial expression. Now, I started off saying smiling is a good thing, but what if this person is talking about something that's rather sad? Well, you don't want to be there smiling at that. Hey, this is the things that I'm overcoming, and I got this sickness, and my dog died, and I got this project at work, and they're just kind of melancholy when they're sharing. Well, you don't want to be, oh, really? Tell me more. No, your facial expression needs to mirror that. Okay, so you probably would have a frown to mirror that expression. Or if someone's sharing with you some great knowledge or great information about a new project, or we achieved our goals, you obviously would want to mirror that with some expression of being very happy or elated by that. Another nonverbal thing that we can focus on is not being distracted. And that could just be fidgeting in our chair, or looking around. So there's that joke about, oh, squirrel, squirrel, and we look at every distraction. Well, every time we do that, it's telling the person, I'm really not focused on you. Sometimes sitting at our desk, someone might walk into our office, hey, do you have a minute? And there we were typing an email, and we go, yeah, how can I help you? And we continue to type our email. That's telling the person, I'm really not 100% focused on you. I'm going to try to multitask here. So one way of a nonverbal sign is just simply not being distracted, and again, maintaining eye contact with them and listening to what they have to say. So those were nonverbal. What about some of the verbal things that we can do? Well, positive reinforcement. So along the conversation, maybe nodding your head, which would be nonverbal, but then verbally going, yes, that's a great idea. Tell me more about that. So you're positively saying, give me more. I'm tracking with you here. Remembering is another verbal sign, meaning I'm going to remember your name. I'm going to remember key points, and maybe I can even reflect back to you. One of the great things that therapists and counselors have the ability to do is they do remember those details. And when they ask you about that, sometimes you scratch your head and go, oh my goodness, that was weeks or months ago when I mentioned that. But they have a way of remembering, which tells you they're engaged, they're listening to you. So in our communication with others, as we are the active listeners, being able to repeat or mention key things that they have said to us. Also, questioning. Asking questions. Tell me more. Now, was that Wednesday or Thursday? Okay, so questioning can help demonstrate that, hey, I'm in this and I'm really trying to understand what you're trying to communicate. And then same thing with questions, but maybe asking questions to clarify. So last week I was with someone, and she was kind of laying things out to me on a Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, and at some point the explanation, either she got it jarbled up or I wasn't listening. And I had to say, hold on a second, are you talking Wednesday or Thursday? So that was a question to clarify, because what she was telling me was important, and knowing that it was a Wednesday or a Thursday was important as well. So asking a clarifying question so that she could give me more information to make sure that I associated the actions with the specific day. So those were verbal and nonverbal ways that we can use to or demonstrate that we're active listening, but we each have a different style of listening as well. And when I came across this, it was pretty interesting. Now, the research that I found, for example, this first one, people-oriented, they just said people-oriented and they gave an explanation. But you'll see at the end, I'm putting some letters, and that corresponds to your DISC profile. Many of you, as you've gone through our programs, have had the opportunity to do a DISC profile. So I'm going to refer to that, and you'll see how it may line up with these different listening styles. So the first listening style is people-oriented. So these types of listeners want to know more information, and they're more concerned about the person. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you feel. Tell me how your weekend was. Those kinds of things. It's about the person. It's about the relationship. And when you think about DISC, the S, if you're a high S or your primary style is S, that steadiness, the S's are people-oriented. They're concerned about the team and how people are feeling and doing. Also, possibly the I, if you're a primary I, the influencer, they enjoy people and want to know more about people as it relates to ideas and tasks. Another listening style, so we have people-oriented. Another one is action or task-oriented. So these people, when they listen, are really concerned about, well, get me to the bottom line. What do you need? What do we need to do? What do you want me to do? So when we think of the DISC profiles, definitely that D, high D individuals are very bottom line oriented. Just tell me what you want. Give me the bottom line. And sometimes the C, the conscientious individuals, the primary Cs, they're interested in facts and tasks and making sure it fits into the overall plan. So the third type of listening style is content-oriented. So these people are listening for the details, making sure what they are hearing makes logical sense. They're interested in the message itself. What does it mean? What's going to change because of this message? And when I think about that listening style, I do think of that conscientious person who's very concerned about a plan that makes sense and about information that makes sense. So they're worried about the content. They're listening for the content. Don't gloss over it. Tell them that. So some of us are content-oriented. And then the fourth listening style, so we've got people-oriented, we've got action or task-oriented, we've got content, and then finally time orientation. So these people, when they are listening, they're constantly thinking timelines, deadlines, okay? They're, get me to the point, tell me what I need to know because I've got things to do. So sometimes, many times, they can appear impatient because they just want the information and they're on to their next thing. And when I think about that type of a listener, I think of that high D. Who is, again, focused on the bottom line, what needs to get done. Many times they are kind of like a bulldozer or a bull in a china shop as it relates to work-related things. They're just on with the next thing. So they're time-oriented. So these are four different orientations and natural wirings as to how people think. And we point this out because you probably fit into one or two of these. But more importantly, the other awareness is that other people might be a different style. So you might need to change or flex or add or detract from your natural style in order for communication to happen. Again, keeping in mind the definition of communication is message sent equals message received. So here are a couple of other examples of active listening, things that someone might say and then it's attached to the benefit. So if I'm trying to build trust through active listening, and that is one of the wonderful benefits and byproducts of it, and in creating some rapport, now I understand your position. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean you agree with their position, but saying, now I understand where you're coming from, or now I understand where the department is coming from. And that helps build that rapport, establish and build that rapport. Another way of active listening is demonstrating concern. So look at this example here. I know how hard corporate restructuring can be. How is your staff's morale? So they're demonstrating some concern for the individual, but even the individual staff. How are they doing? How are they handling that? And again, when they're doing that, I'm demonstrating some empathy, and that is a active listening trait. Another one is paraphrasing. So you're saying that So you're saying that the uncertainty about who will be the new supervisor is creating stress for the team. So, the person's been talking, so repeating back to them or paraphrasing is a fantastic demonstration of active listening. Another one would be some kind of affirmation. It could be yeah, I know what you mean, or in the example here, I understand that you would like more frequent feedback about your performance. Is that correct? So just stating it, putting it out there, and trying to communicate, hey, this is what I'm taking away from what you're telling me. Also, you could ask open-ended questions. It's part of acquiring more information. It's clear that things aren't going the right direction. What changes would you like to see? So now all of a sudden you've got this person who has been communicating. Maybe they have even been complaining about something. And you acknowledge that and then say, well, give me some ideas. How would you handle the situation? So it's an open-ended question, puts the ball back in their court. More importantly, it's communicating to them, I'm listening to you. Let's try to figure this out together. Another example of active listening is disclosing your opinion. So tell me more about that proposal to reorganize your department. Okay, so one way of active listening is trying to say, I agree or I disagree, or let's find some more information out. So it's another type of questioning. And then sometimes, and this again creates that rapport and empathy, you simply volunteer why you might be understanding them or why you might understand their feelings. I was also very conflicted about returning to work after the birth of my son. Would be an example of being able to disclose, hey, I've been wrestling with some of the things that you've been wrestling with. And then you can see the one just popped up there on the screen. I'm sorry, asking specific questions. So we talked about open-ended questions, but you might also ask a very specific question. Well, then what is the rate of your turnover? Okay, so you're not asking for their opinion. You're not asking for an essay. You're asking for a very specific response. So open or closed-end questions are great ways to demonstrate active listening. Wow, that was a lot, so let's quickly review, and I'll be taking questions in just a few moments. But we talked about the benefits of the ADEPT Academy, and again, thank you so much for your participation in that. We reminded you about the 5 characteristics of ADEPT leaders. And then we spent a lot of time talking about communication and, more importantly, listening and understanding how they're linked. We talked a bit about the difference between hearing, which just kind of happens. You don't really focus. It's kind of involuntary. And then listening. And we all want to be better listeners. And it takes work. It takes focus to do that. And then specific around active listening, we talked about the benefits. We talked about some listening styles. And again, the listening styles is something where it can give you increased self-awareness. And then you can become other aware as to why communication might not be clicking the way it needs to. And then we also just talked through a lot of different examples of statements around active listening. So with that winds up our time today. But for those of you who are online, feel free to go over to the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and you can type in a question, and I'll respond to it right now. If you're watching this as a recording, feel free to email me. Email me your questions. Give me about 24 hours to get back to you, but I'd be more than happy to address any questions that this might have stirred up. So while we've got somebody typing in a question, I also want to remind you we do have a program called Live Online. And Live Online is simply a virtual class. The participants are from geographically dispersed. They are from different companies. It is our Foundations of Leadership course. It's 8 particular sessions. We just launched one about 4 weeks ago, and I'm just mentioning this because it'll probably be the end of August, beginning of September, where we'll launch another one. It's a great opportunity for you to get a refresher, or perhaps you've got some new people in the organization. And if you've got a large number, well, probably makes more sense for us just to come out and deliver it on site with you. But if it's only 1 or 2 people, you might sign them up for this so that they can be acquainted with the same kind of information and same kind of vocabulary that you've learned through ADEPT. So first question, how can I set myself up for active listening success? Wow. That's a great question, but it's also a hard question. Meaning you have to be very intentional. So to answer your question, I'll be very intentional. So think about what makes active listening work. Well, minimize the distractions. So maybe finding out or selecting where a particular meeting happens. It might be better to have it in your office with the door shut as opposed to out in the hallway. So the first thing I would do is to set yourself up for success is to minimize distractions. The second thing I would mention is in your mind, be thinking, am I active listening? Am I active listening? Because in the course of a conversation, you might catch yourself wandering, being distracted with an email that popped up, maybe judging what the other person is saying. So I would have this little tape running in the back of your mind. What am I doing right now to demonstrate active listening? Even just think of the acronym, EAR. What am I doing to engage with this person and understand what they're saying? What am I doing to acquire more information? And then how am I responding both verbally and non-verbally? So those are a couple of things that I would suggest that would set you up for success. Active listening is an exercise. It's almost like running or going to the gym. You have to do a little bit of it all the time to get better and better. This is another example of incremental improvement. Just because you watch this video doesn't mean an hour from now you're going to be perfect at this. You're not, but it's constantly improving. Another way to set yourself up for success is maybe you've taken notes through this particular session, and maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, maybe watch it one more time and take some notes. And maybe some of those examples that I gave, some of the verbal and nonverbal signs of active listening could be things that you keep top of mind. Keeping top of mind some of those nonverbals, the eye contact, right? Listening and leaning in. Many times people will hear more from the nonverbal signs than the verbal signs. So I would ask you to focus on that. And once you understand the importance of eye contact or being able to reflect facially the mood that they are in, ask a few clarifying questions, you'll get better and better at it. But those are a couple of things off the top of my head that would help set you up for success to be an active listener. All right, I see someone else. There's another question coming in. Okay, there it is. Okay. So this question, how do you catch yourself when you aren't listening actively? How can I get others to actively listen to me? Great question. In fact, there's two questions there. So how do you catch yourself? You catch yourself. You've got to be self-aware. So if I'm in a meeting and I was locked in at the beginning, but now it's 10 or 15 minutes and maybe I'm really not connecting with the content, maybe I'm really not even connecting with the speaker, asking myself, wait a minute, am I in this meeting or out of this meeting? Am I just sitting here warm in a chair, or am I actively listening? Catching yourself, your eyes wandering, catching yourself not taking notes. Whether or not taking notes is something that comes natural to you or not, it's a really, really good thing so that you don't have to remember things. So you might ask yourself, okay, I've been in this meeting for an hour. I haven't written a thing down. I haven't taken any notes. So catch yourself. You're not going to be perfect at this. In fact, maybe if this is a more intimate conversation where it's just you and one other person or you and two other people, when you catch yourself, you just might go, hold on a second, time out. I've lost my train of thought here. Can we back it up a little bit? I mean, that's a great way to catch yourself, and it tells the other person, hey, what you're saying really matters to me, and the bat is on me here. I got distracted. Let's go back. Could you repeat that section again? So that's one way or several ways that you can catch yourself. Now, the second part of your question is, how can I get others to actively listen? Well, keep in mind, we can't change anyone. However, there are some things that we can do as we're communicating. We could ask questions. So what do you think about that? What's your opinion on that? How would you put that in your words? So there are questions that we can do, and one of the things that great communicators do is ask people questions. And sometimes they're expecting an answer. Many times if we're in a session with 10 or 12 people, I'm expecting you to answer my question. But many times when some people ask a question like that, they're not expecting an answer, but it was a wake-up call to the listener to go, wait a minute, what if that individual asked me that particular question? So one way that you can help others actively listen to you is ask questions along the way. Pause. You've got your speech planned out. You've got your presentation planned out. build into that opportunities where you're asking for questions or asking for clarification. And usually the best way is to ask an open-ended question, not a closed-ended question like, well, does anyone have any questions? I would ask an open-ended question and say, okay, well, Jim, from an engineering perspective, what are your thoughts on this? Or what am I missing? So ask questions. Another thing would be, as the speaker, making sure that you have good eye contact. Okay, if you're speaking and you've got, say, 5 people in the meeting room, not just focusing at your notes, not just focusing at the person in front of you, but making eye contact with each of them, letting them know as the communicator, I'm actively communicating to you. So sometimes that eye contact will force them to look back at you and pay attention. Another way to help others actively listen is to have them take notes. Now, you can suggest taking notes, but you might even go as far as to say, well, this one I would write down. I'd write this down. Or in the case of what we do with you at ADEPT, we have this workbook and we've got blanks that we want you to fill in. We do that on purpose. It's to engage you, to make sure that you're listening. So sometimes you might just simply tell someone, hey, this is something you need to write down. This is worth remembering. Okay, so those are a couple of ways that, one, how you catch yourself when you're not exactly in that active listening zone, and then a couple of other examples where maybe you can help other people become better active listeners. A great question. Anything else? I think that might be it. I don't see anyone else typing, so I would like to just first of all thank you again. Yes, thank you for participating in this, but more importantly, that you're focused on becoming a better leader. This takes time and it takes work, as any great thing does. So thank you for becoming more adept and wanting to be more adept and